Hi, this is Joe Satriani, and you're listening to Sound Vapors.
Well, hello there. It is Tommy Marz, Sound Vapors Podcast. Hope life is treating you okay right now. Today's guest. Okay, so today's episode, I'm really excited about this. I'll tell you why. On this program, I've had the opportunity to speak with some of the greatest guitar players to ever live. I mean, just some of the most innovative, technically proficient people to ever pick up a guitar. And I was thinking about it. These are some of my favorite players, from when I was a kid, some of my contemporary favorites. And so going into the interview today, I just was kind of thinking about that. Like, I just had Orianthi stop by, and that, if you listen to that interview, she is, first of all, she's such an awesome person, but it's just great to talk about guitar with her and where she got her start. And then I kind of went down that rabbit hole. I was thinking about, some of the real innovative guitar players like Mike Eisinger from Incubus, Jeff Schroeder from Smashing Pumpkins, got to sit down with him. Tim Mahoney, 311, another one of those guys that just, is innovative when he attacks the guitar. And then just we talk about technically proficient, Steve Vai. I was thinking about Chris Shiflett from the Foo Fighters, another great conversation. Chad Taylor from Live was another one to talking about those guitar riffs that he wrote for Secret Samadhi for those albums, Throwing Copper. That was a real treat. Then some of the blues players, Eric Gales, he's my favorite blues player of all time. Kenny Wayne Shepherd, So I've just had a really big group of great guitar players stop by and talk guitars. And today's show, the setup is because today's show, I've got Joe Satriani stopping by. We're going to talk about his brand new record, Shapeshifting, that's coming out April 10th. We got into, just the whole thing. We got into the songwriting, the production, working with Jim Scott, at his studio. He had people on the record like Kenny Aronoff playing drums, Chris Chaney playing bass. He had Eric Kaja, Lisa Coleman from The Revolution. She played keyboards on a couple of the tracks. So it was Christopher Gass played mandolin, So it was just one of those things to sit and talk with Joe about this album. And then to my surprise, and I'll give you a clue of one of the things we talked about, to hear him speak about, maybe wondering if, would Chris want to work with him on something? Did Jim Scott want to take on a project that didn't have a vocal? That's an instrumental. To hear him say that, it was just amazing. It was mind-blowing, actually, because, it's Joe Satriani. It just turned out to be one of my favorite conversations, and I'm so excited to share this with you guys because this is definitely one, just like those guitar players that I mentioned, this is one for the record books, man. And as always, if you want to get in contact with me, TOMMYMARZBAND, Tommy Marz Band, I'd love to hear any kind of Joe Satriani story. So if you're a guitar player and this guy inspired you, I'd love to hear your story, man. I'd love to hear all about it. I'm sure he'd love to hear about it. So contact me, Twitter, Instagram, boom. If you're on YouTube, you can drop a comment down below. Let me know where you got your start playing guitar. And if Joe Satriani inspired you, let me know that too. And of course, I always love to hear what's your favorite song of said artist. In this case, Satriani. I'll just tell you right now, I have a couple. I love Can't Slow Down. I love One Big Rush. I am very, I like Summer Song too, but I'm very partial to Flying in a Blue Dream. That was the cassette back in those times. That was the cassette that got me into that style of guitar, Flying in a Blue Dream. And then it was like Passion and Warfare, Steve Vai, and so on. Eric Johnson, Cliffs of Dover, these kind of guitar instrumental tapes, records. But Flying in a Blue Dream is really where I got my start. And then, of course, after I obsessed over that cassette or that album, I went back, surfing with the Alien and everything. And then it's just been on ever since. I've been a fan of Satriani since then. So it's just been one of those things. So let me go get this interview queued up. I hope you enjoy it. Joe Satriani, enjoy this one. All right, I want to welcome in our guest today, legendary guitar player Joe Satriani. All right, Joe, you got a brand new record coming out April 10th. It's called Shapeshifting. Can you tell us how many tracks are on it, and what should your fans expect from this new album?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a big question right there, or two big questions. I'm very happy to answer them. So, Shapeshifting, my new instrumental guitar album, yes, coming out April 10th. This album's got, 13 tracks on it. I think there's a bonus track we put on for people who did the pre-orders. And this is definitely my most eclectic, stylistically wide varying album I've ever done. I'm so happy with how it turned out. It's got a bunch of new people and some familiar, wonderfully talented people helping me out on the album. And it rocks, and it gets dark and super happy, and it just takes you everywhere. I should say, to people that the title Shapeshifting really is the theme that I adapted in a kind of a contrarian moment where I was thinking to myself, instead of starting out an album by deciding on how it was going to be produced and what style of music it was going to be, which is kind of like what everybody does, I thought, what if I went the opposite way and I changed myself for every song so that we could create a record that would be just so much fun to listen to. It would be such a, mind-expanding and emotional journey that you would go on from the first track all the way to what turned out to be the 13th track, that you'd want to go back and listen to it all over again. And so the idea popped into my head, thinking about the old mythological shape-shifting, people turning into other people or animals or things like that. And I thought, what if I, sort of in a partly humorous but sci-fi way, thought about myself changing my musical style to make every song happen instead of changing the song to make it fit with the Joe Satriani style,
Love that.
It became the theme that just propelled me to keep writing in all different areas. And then as I brought new people into the project, they all were so happy to be able to show up for work every day and do something totally different, so it added a lot of energy to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is so much energy on this this whole record. So this one here, this is produced by yourself and also Jim Scott, right?
Yes.
Cool. Well, can you tell us how you guys got together and really how it came about for you guys working together on this album?
Quite by accident. It's really interesting how these things happen sometimes. I really was in the middle last year of not only writing for the record, but I was also doing the Experience Hendrix tour, and Kenny Aronoff was playing drums with me, as well as Doug Pinnick singing and playing bass guitar. And we were just having a blast on that tour. We did 2 legs of that tour. After the first one, I knew that Kenny was the right guy to play drums, and I had already had, quite a lot of material written, but I was inspired as I thought about being in the studio with him, to keep writing. And somewhere along the way, when we started talking about the project and when we could possibly fit it into his schedule, because he's a busy guy, Kenny Aronoff, busiest guy in show business. He just casually texted me one day that while we were trading information about the upcoming Hendrix tour, he mentioned that he had just been up at Plier Studio, which is Jim Scott's studio in Valencia, California. And he said it was such a crazy place and so much fun, and Jim was so cool, and he always gets a great sound. And, it was just sort of like a casual text, and then he went back to asking questions about the upcoming tour. And as I'm looking at the text, I thought, oh, of course, Jim Scott, but, this guy's legendary. But I never thought that he would want to do an instrumental guitar album, so he was never on my list, I just figured he's always busy doing multi-platinum selling vocal-oriented bands,
Right.
Then I thought, well, why not? Maybe he's just sitting around wondering, when is Joe going to call? So I just called him, and one thing led to another, and my wife and I were driving down to L.A. to visit family and friends, and we stopped off at the studio, which is just this beautifully crazy warehouse, fun house for any musician, studio, and what a great environment. And then, of course, Jim is such a special human being. He's just not only that incredible talent as an engineer and a producer, but he's just really a great guy. And I really felt like he is going to be, like all the other guys I've worked with, John Cunninberti and Mike Fraser and the Johns brothers, they're just really great at not only organizing a project, but getting good performances out of you and your band. They're good at making you do things over and over again until it's right, and they're also good at stopping you after the first take and saying, you know what, that is the best. Like, don't even go home,
Right.
We saw eye to eye, and I explained to him the project and what I wanted to do, and he was very excited. So we just said, let's do it. And we found 10 days right at the end of August, the beginning of September, where I could get Chris Chaney, Kenny Aronoff, and myself and Eric Kodia all together in the studio. And so we just went down and we just basically lived in Valencia for a couple of months until we got the record done. It was really a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, that too. And you mentioned, with Jim, his production and his organizational skills, but there's also the mix, which is outstanding on this record. And he's got such a great ear for that. So now you have all of those other things. Plus he's mixing, and which he's an absolute pro, an absolute pro at.
Yeah. We always approach each record with a lot of different fun ideas that we're, enthralled with at the moment, and that touches on like not only the songwriting and the playing, but the instruments, the amps, the microphones, the location, the recording styles, the mixing styles, the mastering styles, and I love the just powerful, organic, dynamic approach that Jim has, and he, in that way, he's very much like all the other guys that I've worked with, is that they really do enjoy dynamics and making sure that the songs, the recordings really have life. Like you can listen to them over and over again and still hear new things. There's still a depth to everything, and it still sounds rich, but it's exciting. And songs take chances, And on this particular record, not only did I get the brilliance, from Jim Scott, but also my good friend John Cunninberty. We've been working since 1980 together. John did a wonderful job mastering the album and kept Jim's vision of how things should sound right to the end. So I'm just so happy the way it all worked out. It was just really, really wonderful experience.
Can you talk about the just getting, you mentioned Kenny and getting Chris Chaney on this thing, them to work together, how that thought kind of entered your head, and then like how long did it take for them to gel in the studio? I'm guessing 10 minutes, but like how was that when you guys first started?
Yes. Well, I'd done a record with Chris Chaney a number of years ago called Unstoppable Momentum, and again, that came, out of blue. It's one of those things where you don't think about calling certain people because you don't think they're listening to your music or aware of what you're doing. But one of my editors, Mike Bowden, had said, I just did a session with Chris from Jane's Addiction. The guy is such a pro and is really great with everybody in the studio, good person and everything. And, I just reached out to him many years ago and asked him about doing that record. And he was like right on board in a second and came so totally prepared and could come up with things in a second, and just was great with dealing with Vinnie Colaiuta, who was the drummer on that project, and Mike Neely playing keyboards, and we were up at Skywalker with Mike Fraser engineering at the time, and it was just I had a great experience with him, and I just thought, wow, this is great. And then we ran into each other, like in Europe on some tours where we were, inexplicably in the same town at the same hotel, one day, while we were both doing some festival somewhere. He was with Jane's Addiction, and I was out doing something. And so he came to mind on this project because of his versatility. I don't think you're going to find another bass player out there that, is like a first call session bass player for movies and soundtracks and all kinds of stuff when it comes to studio work, string bass, classical, jazz, you name it. And then he's in Jane's Addiction, which is absolutely crazy. And so, and for me being, a rock generation kid, I just, I insist that my musicians know how to rock. And you can't write that down in a book, it's just something you got to have in your blood. And
yeah, absolutely.
He certainly has that, and it's really great. It's such an asset for a musician to have the natural ability to play in different styles and to authentically.
Yeah, because you mentioned like being able to rock. Like the first single to come out, it was 1980, and that one, The Thing Rocks. Where did you shoot that video at? Because I love that soundstage that you're on. It's so awesome looking.
Yeah, that's Hurling Studios down in, I guess it's kind of like Burbank, maybe, right on the edge of something, right around there. My son, ZZ Satriani, shot that video. He'd done a bunch of stuff for me over the last, 15, 20 years. He started doing podcasts for us when he was really young, before he was a teenager, really. And then he eventually went to school and got a degree in studio art and film, and he's a young filmmaker in Los Angeles now.
I mean, it looks great.
Thank you. Yeah, he did a fantastic job. He and his friends all came, and they just, I mean, it's pretty funny when he's got to shoot his dad, but we've worked together as long as I can remember, so it's a natural thing. We did that documentary together. I mean, he really brainstormed and did all of that, Beyond the Supernova, and last year he did somehow squeezed out 2 videos for the Squares compilation that came out, and all he had was photographs and his own artwork to try to put those videos together. So he shot me an idea, and I said, okay, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it, and that's what we did. And he had been actually to the studio while we were recording, so he had spent a good number of days just being fly on the wall and filming us recording a lot of the songs. He happened to be there that day when we were doing 1980, so he had a lot of footage of that stuff. And I think this week sometime the director's cut of the video comes out, which has got an intro and an outro.
Very nice. Yeah, because I noticed that there was, looks like there's some shot in Plyer's studio for it looked like you guys recording, and then...
Yeah, there was a lot more of that. There's something funny I learned from the people at Sony Legacy, which is that there's some sort of metrics they have at YouTube, and they notice that a large percentage of the audience will stop watching a video if there's talking at the beginning. And this is something you don't think about when you're making art, So ZZ had put together this great video that set up the 1980, because like you said, it's kind of a throwback. It's a kind of a song, And so there was a setup to like, well, why are these guys doing this, And then, of course, when we got the news about the metrics and everything, we thought, well, we don't want people clicking off thinking it's some sort of documentary about a band. It's a song, we just want them to enjoy it. So ZZ did a quick edit so that it would just start at the top and end at the end, But they said, yeah, once we introduce people to the song, then we can go back to the sort of director's cut, quote unquote.
That's really interesting, and it's cool how you guys went back. Hey, ZZ's going to edit this thing so it plays better, whatever the algorithm is, and then now you have that director's cut. I don't know. The whole thing's interesting. It's very cool. Can we talk about some of the people that you also have? You mentioned all these great players and stuff and people involved with the project, but you have Lisa Coleman, you have Christopher Guest, which I was a little shocked with that, and I guess I knew that he's a player, but I didn't know like to the extent. So can you talk about having them, on the album and Yesterday's Yesterday, which is actually one of my favorite songs on the whole record?
Oh, great. Actually, it's. ZZ's going to be working on a video for that one, and so we're going to be talking about that later on this week. So I'm glad you like that song. Yesterday's Yesterday is an unusual song, but it was something that I really wanted to have on the album. I went into the sessions not knowing if anyone would like it or if it belonged on the album, but I just said I want this album to start with the title track and end with this song, which for me was very evocative of simpler days, kinder days and everything, and it is sort of gained meaning in the current climate that we're living in right now. And but to enlighten you as to how the thing unfolded, it was quite organic. I wrote the song one day in just a burst of optimism and thinking about good times from yesterday, and I was, it's one of those songs you write where you're not even sitting down. I think I had acoustic guitar, I tuned it up, I had one foot on a chair, and I started playing, and there it was. And I quickly, got my Pro Tools up, and I recorded it just like that, And so anyway, I bring it in, and I start telling people, well, these are my ideas. I want this to sound like this. Let's keep going. Don't hold back. And first of all, the other musician on the album is Eric Kodia. Now, Eric is a great guitarist, keyboardist. He was on a few tours and with me a number of years ago. We produced a record together called Engines of Creation, a total crazy trance electronic record back in 2000. And he's been an editor on a lot of albums that I've done. So he plays a lot of keyboards on this record, as well as doing editing. He's a great whistler, so he's whistling on the track.
Yeah.
And one day, we were listening to my electronic piano part that I put down on the song, and I was thinking, like, I'm looking for someone who's got like a real romantic, delicate touch that understands, And he just looked at me and said, "Oh, you got to get Lisa to play on this." And again, it was one of those musicians that you don't think that you can just reach out and call them, And I'm just thinking, Lisa from Prince and the Revolution. I don't think she's going to take a call from me. But he'd done a lot of work with her, and he assured me she was a wonderful person, and she would bring something very unique. And she came in and played on 2 songs, actually. She played on Yesterday's Yesterday. And same day, inexplicably, 2 totally different songs, she played on the song Waiting, which also, just features her beautiful touch, her attention to emotional detail, as well as musical technique.
And I think it takes it to another level too, right? I mean, just having, like you said, Waiting, it does. It takes the album. It's just, we all want to hear your rad guitar always, but it really does give it such a different touch, and it just makes you just stay glued in, locked into the whole thing, start to finish, when you have somebody like her doing those things.
I've always felt that the context is so important for my electric guitar. When I go to play a melody, people are, your fans are listening to the drums and the bass and everything, and so it should be as unique and special as you can make it. And if there are people out there that you think can add some magic to the whole thing, you should give them a call, and that's what happened with Christopher. I've known Christopher Guest for many years. Played with Spinal Tap a couple of times, and wound up making a cameo appearance in his movie For Your Consideration. But I've always known that he's a hardcore mandolin player, plays a few hours every day, and he's a fantastic musician, really disciplined. And so I just sent him the tape, and I said, I got this really happy song. I want to put it on the album, and it would be great to have a mandolin. Do you think you want to play on it? That kind of thing. And he listened to it and responded right away and said, yeah, I can't, get to the studio, but I can record it at home, and I'll send you something. So he sent us 2 brilliant performances that had like 2 different ways in which, a mandolin might play. And at the time, he didn't know that Lisa was going to be on it, and, what the song didn't have the whistling part yet either, so he was unsure about where it was headed. But brave soul that he is, he sent me 2 really great tracks, and we were able to actually use both of them. And I was really, really happy, because it really helps. He just adds like a counter melody, and that's what you want, right? Is someone just to say, okay, I'm not just going to sit here in the background and play, back you up. I'm going to be like a band member would be, if you were playing the song over and over again in front of audiences, And that's kind of like what you look for, the spirit, true musician spirit. And so, yeah, it puts a smile on my face every time I hear him start playing that mandolin. I just go, that's so great. That's so Christopher.
Yeah, and it is. It's so great. Well, hey, Joe, I'm almost out of time here. Just 2 quick things. One is, I don't know what you're anticipating for like the next single. Just a lowly guy's opinion. I know it doesn't matter in the world, but All My Friends just feels like it should be a single. It's just, there's something so uplifting about that song, and it has your signature on it. So if you guys are like saying, hey, I'm not sure, I like to throw that in the ring of a single. I think it's great.
Okay. That's great. I mean, you are not alone on that one, I got to tell you. So your instincts are spot on.
Oh, yeah? Nice. Well, hopefully that song will be released as a single. Well, with that, before I let you go, just with all this COVID stuff and, tours and things being postponed, can you give us any update on your tour schedule? What's happening right now? Do you know anything?
Yes. Well, I can say, echo the sentiment out there is pretty dire. Everyone's wondering what's going to happen, to the touring schedule for the whole year. Today, we finally announced, along with our partners in Europe, that we rescheduled all of most of our shows, our European shows that were to start April 15th for the same dates next year. So we've moved our European tour to 12 months from now, and it's a delicate situation with all the partners in play when it comes to a tour. You wouldn't believe how difficult it is to get governments, airlines, venue owners, agents, and promoters all around the world to agree that there's a crisis and that everyone should be allowed to sort of cancel without getting sued or held economically liable. And so that's been our problem, whereas, I think everybody, every fan out there knows that there can't be a tour, and even if you showed up, no one would come anyway, and you wouldn't want them to, right? So we're all trying to, stop this virus from spreading. Everyone's trying to stay healthy and keep their loved ones healthy. So, but inexplicably, if a government does not say that it's a crisis, then insurance companies won't work with venue holders won't work with promoters, won't work with agents, and before you know it, it's like you want to say, hey, my fans know it's canceled and my musicians know it's canceled. Why can't you guys, know it's canceled?
Yeah.
So we've had to be very delicate, in how we announce the postponement and the rescheduling of these things. So
I'm sure, like everybody listening, we are just hoping that this thing gets over with soon, because I'm having a lot of bands and artists, on the show recently, and everybody's kind of been just dealing with it, coping with it. Some have been doing live streams and, Instagram lives and all these kind of things. But really, I'm starting to think down the road a little bit, because there's so many great albums coming out. And just from a personal note, I want to get out there and see these things performed live. And I know they'll be made up. They will be made up. I know at the end of this year, beginning of next year, there's going to be a ton of that stuff. So it's going to be a great time for that then. But right now, it's like I'm sort of missing that. The album's coming out right now. And so what I mean is that excitement when it comes out. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like, so for instance, this album comes out April 10th. So Shapeshifting will be out April 10th. It's like that excitement, that fuel, when you go and you get that album and you're listening to it for a week and you know that Joe's coming in town, that next Friday or Saturday night, and you can't wait to go watch him play because you got these songs right there. And they're right in your headspace. So, it's new and you can't wait to get the excitement and everything, the energy. And I know there's the other side too. Definitely. There's more time to digest the record, get to know it, get to know the lyrics, the guitar solos, the little nuances in the music. It's like, I totally get that too. I really do. I get it. But I'm talking about that raw energy that you have when an album first breaks. I love that, right? Seeing that band play that live. So we're coping. We're doing what we got to do. And I know everybody's going to go out there and support these great artists when they come, around to your town, and when all this has been lifted and it's safe and everybody can go out there and have a good time. I know that's going to happen. Just a little thought in my head. As this thing goes on longer, I'm starting to think about these things, and that little bit of that part makes me a little bit sad. I know we'll get a chance to go out there and support, especially with Joe when he comes around. Can't wait to go see him play these songs live. All right, friends, I hope you dug this one. This was a really special treat. This was great, man. All right, so if you guys can subscribe and do that thing that you do, I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for the next couple episodes. I got Stuart Copeland stopping back by Sound Vapors. We're going to talk about, we got some good things. I got some Police. I got some Oysterhead stuff. You're going to dig that one. Also got Ernie C. from Body Count, man. You're not going to want to miss that one. So subscribe, stay in the know. All right, it is Tommy Marz, and you've been listening to Sound Vapors.